early read week 5 college football betting preview. We're coming up on October. The season is flying by. Conference play getting in full swing. We got a lot of interesting games, and without a doubt, the most consequential game, definitely of the young season, possibly of the entire season, going down this weekend. That's Alabama taking on Georgia in SEC play. We got Louisville-Notre Dame, which could be a playoff eliminator. We'll see. And myself and my guest today, which I'm going to bring on in just a second, Buck Metrics, a USC alumni, lives in the area, going up against my decrepit Wisconsin Badgers. So we have a little going at it back and forth. So plenty of games to get to. A lot of intriguing games on the undercard, as I'd like to refer to it as. But let's bring on our guest today, Buck Metrics, co-host of the Lean Toss-Up Sports podcast. He was on the show last year. He's great follow on Twitter, great podcast he hosts. Buck, thanks for joining the show. How's it going?
Thank you for having me. Just to be clear, the name of the podcast is actually, it's by Lean Toss-Up Sports. But
I apologize.
No. It is called The Sharpest College Football Podcast. And we only call it that because, as an homage to you, The Sharpest College Football Podcast, except for the early read, is just too verbose, too wordy, and it doesn't work. So,
well, I guess we could, this segues really nicely into my guy, not my guy, because Buck, I came on your podcast to preview the AAC, and
yes.
on that podcast, you asked me to pick one upset in the conference, and I said, without hesitation, Navy will beat Memphis after they probably beat Florida State, or they give Florida State a run for their money. And lo and behold, my guy of the week, Blake Horvath, 192 passing yards, 211 on the ground, and 6 total touchdowns for the Navy quarterback. The new look midshipman offense was absolutely dynamite. Went honestly as good as I could have expected. They nearly blew the game for those that didn't watch. Memphis down 3 scores with about 7 minutes left, scored twice, recover an onside kick, end up getting picked off in Navy territory at the end for the Middies to win it. But my guy, without a doubt, is Blake Horvath. Buck, did you catch that game? Because I'm pretty sure that nukes Memphis' chances of making the playoff.
It should. And a couple other things on that. First of all, when you made that prediction, I kind of thought, I said, okay, well, this guy, he did go to Wisconsin. Maybe he's going back to his Wisconsin roots and getting a little of the bottle on a preview night. I don't know. I didn't see that coming. But, you know, as you and Doc said last week, there's a storied history there in terms of Memphis playing their worst and Navy playing their best in that matchup. So I followed it only from an ESPN app standpoint, and about halfway through, I said, yeah, that was his upset pick. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, if you go through that game, and part of my handicap was this was a new look Navy offense under Drew Cronick. I butchered his name on the pod, my Wednesday pod, but he came in from Mercer, more of a modified triple option offense coming from Mercer. And while some teams I want to fade on the idea that they haven't played anybody or they haven't shown anything, that's almost why I wanted to buy Navy, who hadn't played anybody. They played Temple and Bucknell, and there were guys running with 10 yards of separation from Memphis defenders. Memphis had no idea what was going on, and they nearly blew it, but Navy gets it done, and Horvath, huge reason why. He had a monster day. Honestly, national, this is like a pretty chalky my guy. Usually at the end, trust me, not my guy. It's very niche, but Buck, who is your guy from last week, week 4?
You know, 2 things on that, just to clarify. So you're telling me that Temple didn't show the template on how to beat Navy?
No. The book was still nice and tucked away. They didn't have to rip out the good plays there.
Just want to be clear too. And also, I've got a metric that I developed, Apex, where 100 is the average measure for an average FBS quarterback. My number 1 rated Apex quarterback is actually Horvath in the upper 200s. So that is interesting. That kind of, it's almost like I haven't seen it, but it sounds like Air Force at its best, as they've always kind of been the best passing team of the 3 service academies. And Navy, for being a team that I wasn't really hip on, for how they treated Ken Niumatalolo, this could be a fun team to watch, unexpectedly so.
Yeah. And who is your guy of the week?
Yeah, my guy is you're very generous, and you say who does right by you, and because I'm an immature jerk, I said who did right by me and who made me look smart, and that is Alonzo Barnett III, because in my podcast last week I said My gosh, look at this. Look who I have rated as the 8th best quarterback by my Apex metric. It's this kid Barnett at JMU. And my guy came through, and I know you and I were a little bit kind of on different sides of this trade. I know you had the under in that one.
That did not hit.
It was a quick death, at least for you. There was no doubt about it.
Both teams went over the full game total.
Yeah. But man, he came through, and he to me, not only made me look smart, which is very important, he's kind of single-handedly turned the whole Sun Belt East upside down. It looked like App State kind of by default had the best path to that spot in the title game. And I think with how JMU is quickly getting there under Chesney, and somehow Coastal Carolina, he said uncomfortably under Tim Beck as a path. I think that East is wide open and very different from the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I had my questions about JMU, and I don't want to overreact to beating a North Carolina team where it seems like I don't know if that was a JMU related victory or if it was a UNC related loss. And I'm sure it lands somewhere in the middle, but I do wonder, because if you go back through JMU week 1 against Charlotte, they end up winning 30-7. I wouldn't say it was a comfortable, like that game got away late where it became more of a blowout. The game was pretty tight early. And then Gardner-Webb, who was one of the poor FCS teams, they average less than 3 yards per play. And then they get the bye week. They come out like gangbusters against UNC. So I'm still TBD on JMU, but I will say on the division itself, the Sun Belt East, I mean, with App State falling off, you're looking at a murderer's row of who's going to come out of this division. You got Old Dominion, you got Marshall, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, Coastal Carolina, and then JMU. You got to feel most comfortable about JMU right now under Bob Chesney, with Barnett leading the way.
It's all TBD, to your point. You can't be. The other thing I'm sold on is Clay Helton's just getting a lot of Clay Helton into the Southern program, and now you're seeing just a bad, unphysical defense. But a lot of question marks. That'll be a fun division to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, and that could get chaotic quickly because to that point, JMU hasn't played conference play. They haven't started conference play at 3 non-cons to start. So all of a sudden, drop 1, drop 2. All of a sudden, this division gets turned on its head. App State, meanwhile, who was presumed they were the favorite going into the season. I was Team Texas State there. I thought App State was a pretty vulnerable favorite. They look more than vulnerable. They look cooked. Losing, I think it was like 41-14 or 48-14 or something against South Alabama at home on Thursday night. So bad look there for App State. Speaking of App State, somewhat connected, but not my guy of the week. I told you I was going to niche here. Andrew Conrad. Reed, who's Andrew Conrad?
You got me.
He's the East Carolina kicker. So it was a long Saturday for me. Few bad breaks. I won't go on and on about it, but I had ECU, had them outright, had them with the points against Liberty, who I don't think is as good this year. Game gets delayed 5 hours, which not my guy are the schedule makers and the Liberty administration saying, oh, there's a hailstorm coming. Let's maybe start the game a little bit earlier than 6 o'clock. Maybe beat that. No, we're going to go through a 5-hour rain delay. Game kicks off at 11. I watched the entire thing. ECU jumps out to a 17-0 lead. They pick off Salter. They have 1st and goal. 17-0 second quarter. And Conrad has a 20-yard field goal. Again, they were at the 3. They take the 3 points. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Whatever. Would have been nicer to punch it in. But 20-yarder. Pushed it wide right. There's not enough room for you to push it. It's just you lined up wrong. So misses that. Liberty ends up winning. They punch it in late too to make sure they cover the 7.5 and really just end my damn sour note there. Yeah. I was nearly just scratched out, like even juice out on the day. Whatever, I'll take it. Whatever. No brutal swing there, ECU. And it obviously doesn't have to exactly do with Conrad missing that kick, but it felt like that was where I was like, oh no, here we go. Because the week before, when I had ECU against App State, Conrad missed an extra point to go up 17-0 after a pick 6 and missed a 30-something yarder to lose that game as well. So my numbers show value on ECU. Maybe we'll talk about it later, but I might need to take a week off of betting ECU because the games are not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, you were right coming in the season on them. I remember you liked them, and you kind of talked me into them too. I was concerned about their offensive issues, and I'm still only be convinced on Garcia.
Last week was his best game. He was great last week.
Yeah, but on the season, his metrics are not awesome. But they have not treated you kindly, and I think that kicker might be like on your forever not my guy list.
It's only because I had to watch till like 2 a.m. watching that game too. But who is not your guy of the week? I have a hunch on where you're going to be going as a USC alumni, but we'll see where you go.
I'm going to shock you. I work in the fringes and in the deep woods here, and this is just a temporary not my guy because 2 weeks ago, or was it 3? 2 probably. This guy just had the entire college football world fall in love with him. Thomas Haddock. And what does he do? He loses in overtime to a pretty shaky. I know Pete Lembo's a good coach, but man, Buffalo was looking at the rebuild of rebuilds here. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how that's even close, let alone you lose that game, Mr. Haddock. I mean, I dug in pretty deep into Northern Illinois against Notre Dame. That was Notre Dame's worst game on both sides of the line of scrimmage. It was by far, and keep in mind that they had also played at Purdue and at Texas A&M, 2 FBS road games. And home versus Northern Illinois was their worst offensive rushing performance and defensive rushing performance. I don't know how you can kind of own the lines at South Bend and then lose to Buffalo. Now they have, I'm not as smart as guys like you and Duck, et cetera, who look at the schedules. I think this was just a classic sandwich game where they were stuck between Notre Dame and NC State, and they probably didn't show up. But man, I won't say it's unforgivable, but you used a lot of goodwill there, Mr. Haddock.
That's MAC football for you. Win as a 4-touchdown dog, lose as a 2-touchdown favorite. Buffalo was a game I ended up staying off of. Obviously, was the dead right side, but box score didn't do them any favors. Game was played like in terms of like losing the game outright. Northern Illinois probably just let me look at the post game win expectancy. Northern Illinois probably a little hose the box. I mean, it was an ugly game. Northern Illinois, as I pull it up, Northern Illinois. No, only a 32% post-game win expectancy, so a qualified loss, but it was an ugly game both ways there for both the Huskies and the Bulls. So we'll see if Buffalo, maybe this team is just a little bit further along than people have given them credit for going into MAC play, which we'll see, because it does look like the top is maybe a little bit different than the preseason prognosticators had assumed. Toledo looks like it's in much worse shape, and Miami, Ohio, I think was expected to take a step back, but maybe the offense just isn't there to really compete. So maybe Buffalo could get into the mix and maybe not compete for a title, but be relevant in the MAC discussion.
Yeah, not sure to make the MAC outside of Toledo is again good, and I don't know that somehow the last 3 years Connor Bazelak has just defied gravity when it comes to like just putting up horrible numbers, but really good team performances. I don't get it.
The best team in the MAC.
Apparently, just to be good in the MAC, you just need to fire Brian Van Gorder. That's what I've kind of concluded.
Well, here's some good my guy, not my guy. Before we get over to week 5, starting with Alabama, Georgia, let me tell you about today's sponsor, and that's Rithmm. Rithmm is an AI-generated sports modeling app that lets you get in on the sports modeling action. Rithmm has hundreds of different inputs, different weights that you could put on each factor that you find important to help make you winning sports bets. I have my pressure run rate model. Since starting this season, it has 36 bets, 25 and 11 for a 32.5% ROI on just over-under bets. Rithmm has a super sleek app. It's super informative and makes sports betting that much easier. Make sure you sign up for Rithmm using the promo code in the podcast description below and get started with Rithmm today. All right, we're on to week 5 here. We got a banger of a game between Alabama and Georgia. And I think it's pretty interesting because I think that there's, for a game that has a lot on the line and has so much talent on the field, it feels like we have a lot of questions about both teams. And I think a lot of that has to do with injury concerns for both teams. I think that there's question marks on both Georgia and Alabama sideline, but also the fact that Alabama hasn't been tested all that much by a high-octane passing offense. At the same time, we haven't seen Beck cook all that much. He did it against Clemson enough to get separation. It felt like that was more like Georgia was kind of like leaning on him, and then Clemson kind of just bent over. This is the first game where we're going to see Georgia go up against opponent offense where it might need to come down to Carson Beck slinging it around the yard, which we've seen him do. I think we could both say, Buck, we're pretty confident he could do that. But last year in the SEC championship game, he didn't do that. Now, my counter to my own counter is this is a totally different Alabama team, coached by a whole new staff, different players everywhere. And I think this Alabama defense is pretty suspect. So, Buck, I'll give you first word here. What are some of your thoughts on Alabama, Georgia?
So first, I'm going to go with my descriptive, not the predictive metrics. And a couple things that really stand out to me. I described the Apex metric that I use. Jalen Milroe, 192 Apex, which is absolutely elite. I thought he would fit well, after we saw what Penix did under DeBoer and just throwing the ball way downfield. And that's exactly what Milroe does. Sometimes he struggles with the short stuff. So he's been a good fit, and obviously he's a lot more mobile and athletic than Penix, especially when Penix got dinged up. He just wasn't the same guy. So I'm liking what I'm seeing there. Here's what really sticks out to me. Kind of wanted to correct you a little bit. We've seen Beck cook. His Apex last year was about 150. This year it's down to 122. And yeah, in fairness, in theory, playing Clemson might drag that down a little bit, but I don't know. NC State put up 35 against Clemson. Clemson's defense is not the same this year, not to get too sidetracked. So yeah, I can't really use that as an excuse. And, the guy didn't really light it up when they could have used him to really just kind of, take the controls at Kentucky. He kept that a close game. They should have asserted themselves. I'm not seeing it with him this year, and I would have wanted to see it by now. I know that you've made the point because I'm just a math nerd and I watch basically my team and the games I'm on. You've mentioned that you've seen Alabama just leave guys open that just, for the grace of God, just didn't get hit. Maybe there's some of that too, but their defensive apex is a -9. So I think that overall that's going to be a lot of misses to get to a number that's that stiff. They're better than Georgia. When you're getting to numbers that are this small, you've got two good pass defenses from a metric standpoint. I'm showing Alabama as the much better running team now. They haven't faced, again, in theory, the defenses that of the type that Georgia has, but there's a pretty wide margin there too, and they've got a better explosive, passing game explosive margin too.
I would say Alabama is the more explosive team.
Yeah, and by a player standpoint, I've got Ryan Williams. I have a metric, Ryan, receiving yards above newbie. Basically just saying for the number of catches that this player has, how many yards would a noob, basically replacement level guy, get, and how many yards does this guy have?
So it's like war for a receiver to make it to baseball.
Exactly, and it's cumulative too. That's what I like about it too. So you don't have one guy that gets a 99-yard reception and he's the best and he ruins all your numbers. Mm-hmm. Has to be over an entire season. So Ryan Williams is 6th, and that's nuts. That's nuts for a true freshman.
He's incredible.
Crazy. The highest rated guy on Georgia is Dominic Lovett at 95th. So you've got the alpha dog. You've got a quarterback that clearly gets along with him well. You've got a proven coach. Now, obviously, Kirby Smart is a proven coach too, but I love DeBoer. I think he's lost like 6 games in his career or something stupid like that. It's crazy. People don't understand, like he's got like just an insane 1-loss record as a coach. I guess what I'm going to, I don't have this as bettable. So that's the predictive metrics or the descriptive. Predictively, I have this basically a 1-point game either way. My co-host, just for the uninitiated, my co-host is also a math nerd. He's a political pollster, just deals in data and numbers stuff too. So when our numbers coincide, that's what we call a dual model play, and those are the best plays. They've hit over 60% the last 2 years. He's gotten this the other way with Alabama winning by 4. So this is not a bet for me. I'm not playing this one, but just all the descriptive metrics just tell me I like Alabama here.
So I lean Georgia, but when I dive into the numbers, I'm a little gun shy to get involved there. Michael Williams supposed to be back, stud defensive player, but Tate Rodemaker, offensive lineman for Georgia, particularly. He's going to be out. It seems like he is still recovering from tightrope surgery and a knee sprain, so he's going to be out for this one. One of the starting offensive linemen's also going to be down. Roderick Robinson, one of the running backs behind Trevor Etienne. I agree where Alabama's more explosive. My question is what if this game is like last year? Because if we go back to the SEC title game, that game was more about Georgia's offense struggling, and I think I'm confident in saying this Alabama defense is worse. Now, that was a neutral field. This is on the road, Tuscaloosa. It's going to be a different environment. I understand that. But just from a team perspective, I think Alabama's defense is worse. They lost a stud pass rusher like Dallas Turner. Their secondary still relatively green. Even if they are better than maybe how I'm treating it with my eye test, it's still a green secondary going against the best passing unit yet, even if Georgia maybe isn't as explosive. I wonder if Jalen Milroe can dictate this game. This guy, now we're going on more than a year and change now of him being the starting quarterback of Alabama. And this guy is a big play waiting to happen. So far this season, 4 big-time throws to 0 turnover-worthy plays. 26% of his throws are deep throws, so 20 yards or more down the field. Go back to last year, Milroe, 27 big-time throws. 23% of his passes were down the field. If he's going to continue to stretch that defense and really put pressure on them vertically, is Milroe going to wreak havoc both as a thrower and then as a guy running and taking off? That's where I think that's where the game gets crazy. And listen, I'm like a Carson Beck truther. I think he's the best quarterback prospect in the looking at the NFL. I think he's like a ready-made quarterback. But in this game right now, Jalen Milroe kind of scares me in the setup, especially where you see some of the injuries, especially on the Georgia side. I don't know. What do I have it as? I think I'm pretty close to fair on this. I think I have Georgia favored by like 1.5, 2. I lean towards the under. I make it closer to 48. I believe it's 48.5 right now. So not like a real huge edge here, but I'm really interested to see where this one goes. Maybe it's a sit out and watch it and see if maybe you can learn a little bit about something, because I still feel like this Alabama team, I feel more comfortable and I know what Georgia is and then I know what Alabama is, but that also means that Alabama might have a higher ceiling to beat Georgia.
Yeah, 3 responses.
I went long-winded there.
It's no. It's counterintuitive, but honest to God, I almost want to whisper this. I think somehow this defense might be better than last year's Alabama defense, and it's sacrilegious to say. They had Saban, but is it maybe possible Kevin Steele just kind of got whatever effort out of Alabama last year, and maybe the new staff's gotten a better effort. I don't know. I'm showing them as a 6. I have the power rated defensively 16.0. And it's early and numbers get weird in this first few weeks when I have in-season metrics, but that's better than Alabama was at any point last season. Which brings me to your underplay. I like that. I have 2 elite defenses here. When I have 1 elite defense, basically rated like 9 or higher, and I have a margin of 8 or more of my projection to the line, that's an underplay. I'm projecting this 20-19. That's a 10-point margin. The only reason I'm not playing it is I do have Georgia's offense as elite too. But I definitely would not step in front of you to say don't bet the under. There's a lot of green flags here.
This is one where, again, haven't played it myself. That's just kind of where I'm thinking early in the week. And if you go back to Alabama-Georgia last year in the SEC title game, again, it's not a perfect comparison because it's a neutral field. That game went over, and I bet the under in that game. It got over, but it wasn't due to a massive offensive outburst. The final score was 27-24. I mean, if you look at the box score, pretty much dead even. 321 total yards to Georgia. Alabama 306 in that game. It's more that you're one big play away from this total in the 40s from it getting absolutely nuked. And I know that sounds like so simple, but if all of a sudden a team falls behind a ton, the game script just completely changes, and all of a sudden you have teams that can be explosive, taking more chances, and that could either lead to turnovers and short fields or a Ryan Williams 70-yard house call. And then all of a sudden a total in the 40s is just completely turbo fucked. It's over. So so that's one reason why I haven't fired on it yet. Again, if you go back to that SEC title game, the closing total in that game was 52.5. So you are getting a lower total to begin with. I believe that there might be some weather involved in this game. I know that there are hurricane warnings in the South this week, especially. So something to keep an eye on. Maybe that's impacting this total. But I mean, this game, there were 21 points scored in the fourth quarter as Georgia was trying to mount a comeback. So something to keep in mind. But a lot of really good thoughts there on Alabama, Georgia, and where this game might be going. I want to turn to a game I have an opinion on. I have two opinions on it, actually. Louisville-Notre Dame. So Louisville gets a fraudulent cover, one of the more annoying ones for me last week. I had Georgia Tech block kick to the house. But that was Louisville as a massive favorite, as a double-digit favorite. That's not what I want Jeff Brom. I want Jeff Brom as an underdog because at Purdue, the Spoilermakers, he was an upset killer. I could try and pull up the number real quick on the trends and all that. And then even last year against Notre Dame, underdog, won outright. I know he's going on the road, different team, all that, but like these are the spots where I want Jeff Brom. Early market love towards Notre Dame, pushing them out to a 6.5 point favorite, depending on where you look. And I don't know if you could trust this Notre Dame team to get margin. So I lean towards Louisville. I have a bad number on this one, but I also lean towards the under. Buck, what are your thoughts on this one? I'm curious because I'm this is not like I'm some market wizard, but I do feel like I have a pretty good pulse on the betting market. And this is one where it kind of got smacked right back in my face, and I took a 4.5.
I'm still trying to figure out Notre Dame. I really like Notre Dame coming into the season. I loved them bringing in Denbrock and Riley Leonard. I thought that would just be peanut butter and jelly and everything would be great. And their defense, they're at the point, I think, where guy like Freeman, same about Oklahoma, you've got the head coach that knows how to coach defense and their defense is always going to be there. This felt like the missing piece to me. And Riley has stunk this year. Riley Leonard, I was getting his name backwards. Apex is 63. That's Connor Bazelak territory. And you on the other hand, you've got Tyler Shuck, who, we just have to say Tyler Shuck when he's upright because he gets hurt every season. It's early. He's healthy. That's a good sign. His Apex is 233. I have him right now as the third-ranked quarterback in all of FBS. He's just playing out of his mind.
I think that might be somewhat schedule dependent.
And that's one of my notes too. Now my Apex, it doesn't pick up FCS games, so I don't think they played an FCS team.
They did. Austin paid, but yeah.
Okay, so that's out, and that's post Scotty Walden, so it's really bad. But that's not skewing the numbers here. Georgia Tech, I think, is a fair to okay. I think you like them a little more than I did coming into the season. Jacksonville State. Clearly they started off the season with some defensive issues. So that's getting a little skewed, but what more do you want than like being the third rated, quarterback? I don't care who you're playing. You're absolutely killing it. They have two guys that are top 100, Ryan, from receivers, which I love. Their explosivity, their Ryan per game is 215 as a unit versus just 64 to Notre Dame. Just the predictives are telling me that Notre Dame is just a slog offensively. Notre Dame is much more my running metric. Just it's a ground game above Boston College, who now can run the ball. But when I came up with a metric, they were like the absolute worst under Jeff Half-Life, as I called him at that point. He was at that stage of his career. They've got a 191. Louisville's 100. Brom doesn't really run the ball anyway, so that's actually a pretty good number for him, although it's been against some lesser talent. But Notre Dame's pass defense is just awesome. Defensive Apex at 8. Really tough. We're talking in that elite category, whereas Louisville's given up a lot against teams that really don't pass the ball between Georgia Tech and Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State with the new quarterback, Georgia Tech with the very known quantity quarterback that they don't, not a dynamic guy. So that's a concern too, but it probably won't hurt him with Riley Leonard. This is a tough one to me because, maybe it's just because I'm a USC guy and we have quarterbacks and receivers that just kind of are on every street corner here. And so I'm a little biased towards the explosive, offenses that you have with that. And boy, if Notre Dame can control the line, they should be able to win this, but Louisville can hang with them too, and I guess if you're going to pull an upset, it's going to be like on that kind of a passing game. So this is tough to me. I guess gun to my head, I would like to take Louisville in the 5.5, but I'm passing on this one in terms of making a play.
Yeah, to me, what drove me towards Louisville was, first of all, I made the game 3.5, like 3.4, 3.5, so 3.5. I make the total much lower, so I think maybe I should have went under instead of side. But I think the real edge in this one is Louisville's ability to get into the backfield. They have a super aggressive defensive line that currently ranks. Again, it might be a little smoke and mirrors because it's only a few games into the season, but they're currently 20th in pass rush grade against a Notre Dame offensive line that is down 3 offensive line starters. And the team hasn't necessarily shown the ability to throw the ball down the field. Okay, they cooked Purdue, but Purdue just got absolutely lit up by Oregon State. So, and if remember, and I know some of it was like Riley Leonard quarterback questions, but nobody wanted a piece of Notre Dame in that game at Purdue. And I know it was injury concerns, but I'm not sure Riley Leonard has necessarily calmed the concerns about this Notre Dame passing offense. This team is currently 88th in EPA per pass. And I know Notre Dame is a really strong defense, and I know Louisville, this is their first true road game, but with Ja'Cory Brooks and possibly Colin Lacey coming back next week, those are 2 high-end receivers that are big play hunters. You might need just a few explosive plays to kind of put Notre Dame in a really, really tricky spot here, because we've seen that this team isn't good. They did against Purdue, but look at what else they did. They had a slog against A&M. They obviously lost outright to Northern Illinois, sorry. And then they were in a bit of a slugfest against Miami, Ohio. I believe there was 3-0 in the second quarter. And I know they end up winning, I believe, 28-3, but don't know if that's necessarily instilling so much confidence that this team is going to go beat, at the very least, an above average team by margin. And that Miami, Ohio game was at home. I also think there's something to be said that Louisville, they just had their bye week in week 3. They came off the bye to play Georgia Tech. This is Notre Dame's 5th game in a row. And I just mentioned this has been like an emotional, taxing season so far for them, with the win at A&M, with the loss to Northern Illinois, and all the injuries. And by the way, Riley Leonard still has a shoulder injury. So all that to say, there's a lot of points of trust with Notre Dame, in my opinion. Like, if this hits 7, I got to get back in. And I know you're not supposed to chase a bad bet with more, but like, this is where you're crossing through a pretty significant number in a low total.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Colin Lacey. I didn't know that he was injured. I was curious in the first game. I had him at South Alabama as a top 10 receiver last year by my Ryan metric, and I just thought, when I saw he transferred to Louisville, I thought, well, geez, this is going to work out really well. He had like 1 catch, I think, in the opener, and I didn't know what happened. I thought, well, maybe he's just not working out. And you've got, like I said, they already have 2 guys that are top 100. You put that in there, and this is going to be a real challenge to defend. I don't care who you are. If you've got 3 explosive guys like that, and you've got a coach that knows how to use those kind of pieces. Think back to, like, what Braum usually has, like 1 guy.
Yeah.
And maybe 1.5. You could have 3 legit guys here. I'm actually getting a little scared just talking about this. That's interesting. Yeah.
He is practicing, hopeful to return. It was a broken collarbone about a month ago. We'll see if he actually plays. Obviously, that would super help Louisville. And look, I respect this Notre Dame defense, and maybe that's why the under is more the play. I know, like, revenge narrative after Louisville smacked them last year at home, but you're getting a lot of points with a low total, and I trust Louisville's offense more. I think they could make this an uncomfortable type game for Notre Dame, where I still think there's a cap on this offense. So, we'll see what happens. But I got a bad number. Maybe I'm dead wrong on this game, but we'll see as the market develops. Let's move on to USC, Wisconsin, the battle of our esteemed institutions. So, USC, they almost started Big Ten life and style, being the national champs, but bad history of tackling reared its ugly head, Buck, on that fourth quarter run by Khalil Mullings, and USC loses. But I think in the loss, There were some positives to take away in that game. I think Miller Moss, I'm not crazy about him, but I think he did. That's that's going to be the best defense he plays all season. And I think on the road, his first true road game, I think he did what was necessary, especially when the run game wasn't working. He threw the ball 51 times. He now faces a Wisconsin team where I'm hyper concerned about the defense. Obviously, the offense is now turning over to Braden Locke after Tyler Van Dyke blows out his knee. Wisconsin off a bye, USC traveling back home. Is there maybe a bit of a hangover here against what I think at the very least with Wisconsin, you're going to get probably the best effort. I think I say that half optimistically but just with the bye week going to Locke, I think you see maybe a renewed spirit. I don't think you see this team walk through the game. Do I think it's going to work? I don't know. What are your thoughts on this game?
One thing I will mention is you kind of mentioned it. An angle that really, I don't know if it gets in the baked in the market that much, but I keep an eye out for it. Except for last week, unfortunately, is that first conference road game of the season. It gets overlooked in some specific spots, and that's what Wisconsin's looking at here. Just as a side note, some great context is Pete Carroll was 4-5 when he was at USC in conference road openers, and I think he lost maybe 5 other conference games in total besides that. And I think it's a really tough angle. There might be a little bit of a break here in that it's a 12:30 Pacific game. I think if it was 5 o'clock, the Coliseum's a very different place at 5 p.m. versus 12:30. I know Wisconsin's kind of always on, if you will. Read into that what you will, being an alum. From a descriptive metric standpoint, just the passing game for Wisconsin, maybe this guy, the new guy, is going to really turn it around. This becomes a different discussion.
He's not.
Apex of 51. USC's got a defensive apex of 57, which would usually be pretty good. Now that's skewed by facing Bryson Barnes and Alex Orji. But still, I think that the defense is sound enough. They did have the USC last week gave up 3 big plays, which really just cost them. What's crazy is, they're still fixing the defense. It's not fixed. But outside of those 3 plays, Michigan had 133 yards on 43 plays, 3.1 per. So literally, they did almost nothing outside of those 3 plays. It was really feast or famine for them. I'm looking at Wisconsin, and I'd love to talk with you about this in a moment about why. Defensive apex of 155. Now, that's brutal. That's tough. You're turning basically everybody into Caleb Williams.
Really quick, just for listeners. So defensive apex of 155. What is, I guess, average and what's elite? Just for like a reference point.
100 would be average. 100 is an average FBS quarterback. And last year, Caleb Williams was a 156. His apex.
So this is apex allowed that you're saying Wisconsin's
defensive apex. Yeah.
So obviously 100 being average, 155 would be below average, and then vice versa for offense. 155 is above average, and 100 would be replacement level again. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And facing Jalen Milroe is going to skew those numbers and Ryan Williams, but that is a very unfortunate matchup for a really good USC passing game. I think if there's a template on how to beat USC, not that USC is otherwise unbeatable, but the easiest way is exactly what Michigan had on defense, was just, okay, we've got an end, and your topiary tackle cannot keep up with them, and it'll be a direct line to the quarterback every play. That's a concern when you're facing a team that has ends like Michigan. I don't know if Wisconsin does. And this kind of gets to the point of the Wisconsin defense. It's and you talked about this a little bit last week. I love Fickle. Fickle did an awesome job at Cincinnati, and I thought he was a great hire. And then he brings in Phil Longo, and he kind of pooped in the punch bowl. And I don't know if I think they're still trying to figure out their identity about what they are. Longo just screws that up. Yes.
It's like fitting a square into a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
It's not working out. I make an argument that there's just like a complete difference in philosophy. Now, and I don't think Braden Locke is very good. I think that guy is probably selling insurance in a few years after he graduates. But what he does come from. He was a Mississippi State recruit, so under Mike Leach, air raid. In a similar vein of what Phil Longo wants to do, he is more run-based principles, but in that quick passing scheme, that's what Tyler Van Dyke was supposed to do. Maybe the drop-off Van Dyke to Locke isn't that much. I don't really know because I wasn't high on Van Dyke either. So big picture, I'm down on Wisconsin. I don't think Locke is going to unlock something, pun intended there. But I do think that this offense, there is a chance that Longo, with the extra prep as well off the bye, can maybe get this offense like to not be a disaster. Because I think a lot of people left the LSU game with USC's defense like, wow, like this defense is different. Well, granted, they were one of the worst defenses last year, so they are now like they're good. But I didn't like think they were some elite unit. I didn't think that they were like, this is like, oh my, like people were making some pretty crazy claims about USC after that LSU game. I was more like, okay, let's see where this goes, because I thought LSU still moved the ball pretty well. Some red zone blunders kind of stunted them. I did not bet it myself, but I have written down the under in the game because I think USC is going to be able to spread out Wisconsin and let it fly a little bit and get into the 30s. I do think Wisconsin can maybe play a little bit in this one in terms of maybe this is more of a hunch, but maybe they up the tempo with a guy like Locke, try to play a little bit faster. Also, you do have USC off a very taxing, emotional game where they also lost. Like there were some injuries. I believe it was Lake McCree got banged up.
McCree's out.
A few defenders went down. Maybe Wisconsin tries to jump on a potentially vulnerable USC team after a big effort against Michigan. I'm not going to call for an outright upset. I don't even really like Wisconsin to cover in this one. I think the number's pretty sound here. Maybe I would lean Wisconsin 2 touchdowns, but like nothing strong there. If I were to bet something, I kind of lean towards over, where it's like USC into the 30s, Wisconsin, they get theirs though. You know, the offense doesn't look like a total corpse because, I mean, this total is really saying that USC's defense is going to suffocate Wisconsin, which I just don't know if that's the case. Like
45.5, right? Or about that? Is that what you're saying?
I see 50. Was it 50.5 still?
All right. Maybe I got the wrong one. Okay.
Let me pull it up. It's at the bottom, I believe, of 50.5, 14.5 and 15.5. Wisconsin, even against Alabama, game was over. They did have a drive in the second half, have the extra week. Maybe that's the angle to take in this game, where maybe their offense shows like a little bit of life. Because this does almost feel like I don't want to get stuck in the narratives, but almost like a kitchen sink kind of game for Wisconsin. You know what I mean? Like big effort out of the bye to really show some life and like try and capture the season. But USC just has way too much talent.
So I will just give you why I would not bet the under. Although,
wait, why you wouldn't bet the under or the over?
You said over.
I lean towards over. Haven't bet it myself.
Okay. Yeah.
You disagree?
USC's not. They're almost elite. They're about 1.5 points short. I could maybe see it. Here's the thing this is why I like USC on the side here. This is one of those instances where my model and my co-host model both have USC by a significant margin. I have it 42-15. He's got it 44-23. So we've got over a touchdown.
Hey, over.
Exactly. And it's over by a significant margin too. I tend to do better on unders. And with, there's more elite offenses than USC's, but I definitely would not talk you out of it. But again, this is one of those dual model plays, as we call it, where we both like one side here. It's just, they like USC's offense even after that, whatever, against Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great points. And overall, you're still feeling good about the Trojans? You guys think you guys are in a good place?
Yeah. I don't want to say that's the best team we're going to face. I think that might be one of the toughest. That might be the toughest venue / matchup, just between that horrible matchup at offensive tackle for us and first conference road game. That was, as you said, that was our quarterback's first road game, period. Just tough spot. And I saw a couple of people just, I don't really buy this kind of stuff, but I can see it, the whole wounded animal aspect of Michigan at home really needing one. Not that USC didn't trade, but USC came out. I don't say they didn't come out. They didn't come out trying, but it was just a weird start to the game. And I want to be a gentleman here. Interesting welcome to the conference from an officiating standpoint, he said diplomatically.
And we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
One more game I want to talk about. I have a bet on this game, and then we could kind of maybe go a little bit faster, shorter handicaps, maybe just quick back and forth on them, and we could try and hit as many games as we can, give an early word on a bunch of things. Arkansas, Texas A&M. So I'm going through my notes on Saturday night, and I write down I like Arkansas on the side at over 6. Open 6, okay. Total opens 49.5. It gets bet up immediately. It's now 52.5. 52. There are 52.5. So I bet 52 to the under. I don't know if it's going to be Connor Wegman or Marcel Reed. I'm not sure I don't know how much the difference is, even if it's a healthy Connor Wegman. I'm not sure what the difference really is, because I think it's pretty apparent that Texas A&M wants to implement a run-heavy scheme. I still don't know if they have the difference makers on the outside to really take the top off. And when I go through this Arkansas defense, the defensive line under Travis Williams has been pretty stout against the run. And this is a team, and maybe Ollie Gordon's a little washed. He's averaging only 3.5 yards per carry, but team is top 20 in EPA per rush, and they played Auburn, who, again, maybe these teams aren't as good as we thought, but it's still like a lot of these teams haven't played anybody yet, and Arkansas at least is putting on these games, like real games that they're playing.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, I may be like talking in circles there, but
no,
they're not playing garbage, and they're top 20 in EPA per rush on the defensive side. So I think both, and on the other side, you look at Arkansas's win against Auburn last week, wasn't necessarily the best effort for that Arkansas offense. Taylon Green struggled. I was curious how he would do in SEC play. He kind of struggled. I think, in my opinion, A&M's defense is the best unit on the field of the four. Yep. So I think this game might be more of like two teams just kind of banging into each other and not getting much to go. So I know it's on a fast track. I know it's at Jerry World, and Arkansas does have some explosive capability with Bobby Petrino calling the offense. And I know Jaquindon Jackson looks good, but to me, this is under. I'm not sure if this Arkansas offense is going to look like the one that put 600 yards against Oklahoma State. I think it's going to look more like the one that kind of slogged through the game against Auburn. I'll pull up their numbers right now from last week against Auburn. Again, they win 24-14 against Auburn. In that game, though, Arkansas
it wasn't that exciting, I can tell you.
They 4.66 yards per play, 19th percentile, an EPA of per drop back of negative 0.29, 18th percentile. They won the turnover battle 5-2, so that helps you get the win there. But this wasn't like a fully explosive game or anything like that. So I think A&M can dictate this game, and I think they want to play this one in the low 20s. Like I think that this could look something in the neighborhood of like A&M, let's say 24-20, something like that, like a tighter game. So under for me in this one. Any thoughts there, Buck?
Starting with your under, as I do throughout this and my own pod, I will toot my own horn here. I am pretty freaking awesome at unders. And
all right, so mush this one, please.
Okay. I'm just going to say, I'm very disciplined about what I found in doing back tests is I stick to using an elite defense on my underplays. And I don't have either of these as close to an elite defense.
Okay.
It's an elite defense is going to show up week after week after week after week. When you're hoping like a crappy whatever just shows up instead on offense, well, maybe they're crappy because they're inconsistent. And on the whole, they're crappy. So this is not an ideal underplay for me. Right. My model has this basically right on the number. Now, in terms of the side, I think you're right on. Just Texas A&M is kind of sloggy. Wegman, I think, misses the guy that's now going to be in the other press box, Bobby Petrino. Wegman had sneakily really good metrics. He was like at a 120 apex last season, which shocked me when I looked at it. This season, he's at a 56. And I love Elko. I loved Elko when he was a DC at Notre Dame and at A&M. And when Duke hired him, it took me like an hour to say, this guy gets it. Love this guy. So it kind of, and not to get too whatever, I was sad to see him go to A&M because it's just a weird program, and that's 5 episodes by itself. So, but I haven't seen him do anything wrong except for one thing. When he hired Colin Klein, I thought this is a really weird hire. And if you look up Colin Klein's experience, there's a lot of Kansas State in there, and more Kansas State and a lot of Kansas State. And I don't know if that's kind of like, I want a more well-rounded OC at a big-time program, and I just don't know if it's going to work out. I think he was a good fit for Kleiman, but doing well under Kleiman and doing well for Elko, I think, could be 2 totally different propositions. And I think you're seeing a lot of that learning curve / process about, being in a different program that's basically in your blood. I mean, he's Kansas State all the way. I think they're struggling. They do run the ball well. My GGAB metric, your running effectiveness, kind of like your WAR, but for running. Texas A&M is 170 per game, but guess what? Arkansas is 164. They don't get there the same way. Arkansas kind of spreads you out and gets you uncomfortable, but guess what? They run for about the same yardage effectiveness per game. When you get to explosiveness, Taylor Green is just a disaster with the ball in terms of ball security, but they are explosive. The Ryan per game here, Arkansas is basically twice what A&M is, 145 to 72. Andrew Armstrong, I'm not going to pretend like I know all these guys. He's like a
basketball player. He's huge, big boy.
Okay, 7th nationally in player Ryan, just a beast from a metric standpoint. And I like A&M's defense, but that's the one thing that makes me think that I've got, I think the market has the wrong team favored here.
I can see it.
I have Arkansas 28-23, my model does, and my co-host has it 22-17. I can tell you that when there's a margin that much, we've got basically, quote, the wrong team favored, also known as WTF colloquially. Especially early in the season, that is a really profitable play just on money line as well.
It is a neutral site also. So it's not like you're going into College Station taking a team that might have a quarterback that has some ball security issues. This is a neutral site. So,
I will say Taylor Green's ball security issues travel anywhere, home or away, apparently.
Boise or Fayetteville. Great stuff there. Great handicap. I'll give. What other game is on your mind? Anything, anywhere you want to go?
Yeah, let me see.
Buck's choice.
This one came from out of the blue. So week 5 is the first time I have my metrics in season. I'm pretty disciplined. I bet literally like 0.05 to 0.02 units until I have in-season metrics. And then I just run the numbers. And this is one of those plays that literally came from out of nowhere. Washington at Rutgers. Rutgers giving 2.5. My model loves Washington. And I actually, this completely is unexpected for me. I have Washington under 6.5 wins this season, complete rebuild. I actually have them really good on both sides of the ball too, which shocks me. Now I know they've played, my model does adjust for caliber of opponent. But I have them lead on both offensive and defensive side of the balls. Will Rogers, 168 apex. It's early, that'll regress, but that's a really good quick fit. I thought that was going to be a struggle, because he's really a Mike Leach guy. And I guess, Fish is a good offensive mind. He's find a way to make it work. They've got an explosive offense. Defense is really well, which surprised me. They didn't really have a lot of talent last year. They're starting over. Maybe the Belichick thing is working, he said, with a question mark. This is what's really crazy, Reed. I'm curious. My model has this 42-20 Washington. And my co-host, and here's the thing, my co-host does simulations. I'm just numbers. He does simulations. There's 1,000 simulations. He has it 34-17 Washington. This is unbelievable. This is one of those UFOs that comes in from nowhere. It's like, I have no idea. I'm not going to say talk me out of it because I have to play this, but give me your side of this one. Give me the same narrative here.
I bet Rutgers at cheap money line. So Washington has one true data point, I think, of a quality team. I don't consider Northwestern one. It's that Washington State game in the Apple Cup. And they allowed 6 tackles for loss against a Washington State defense that I do not hold in high regard whatsoever. This is a team that just let up 50+ to San Jose State. And I think that it's a bad look there. They got stuffed on the run there. And this is factoring in. Washington is going across the country on short rest to play at night at Rutgers, a team that is now undefeated and I think has, at a very least, a proven identity on both sides of the ball, where Washington, I think that they've looked good and they have taken care of business against down opponents. And I bet Washington in that Apple Cup game more as a fate of Washington State because I thought they were overvalued. But when I look at Washington, even in that game, that got stuffed a bunch. Again, I mentioned the 6 tackles for loss. They were able to hit some explosive plays over the top, but Rutgers, they kind of suffocated Virginia Tech until late in that game where Virginia Tech just started like full on like garbage. It was basically garbage time that turned into a competitive game all of a sudden. That game was pretty much lockdown.
Let me interject there real quick. At this point, and I like Virginia Tech. I actually had them in the playoff. He said with all the shame in his voice.
Yeah.
I can't say they're much better than Northwestern or, I mean, you know, they're not good. And I think that's one of the things
Rutgers had them suffocated for 50 minutes of that game. And then all of a sudden, Rutgers kind of like wet their pants a little bit with some decision making. But to me, this is a defense that I think I can count on, where I still think Washington is a bit of an unproven commodity. This is just something that is like that just stuck out to me while going through the notes. Let me just pull this up real quick. Penalties per game. Washington is at the bottom in terms of penalty yards per game. They check in if it will ever load. I think it's like bottom 5 in the entire country. I know it's a small sample size, only a handful of games. Yeah, 5th worst penalty yards per game in the country. They have averaging 94 yards of penalties. Meanwhile, Rutgers 10th fewest. So there's a huge discrepancy there. You mix that all in with the spot, cross country, short travel, first time doing this for Washington with a whole new staff. I had to play Rutgers at a cheap money line. Like if this, and I would also lean towards the under though. So like if it's like this one, like 3.5, I would say, yeah, Washington's probably the bet. But to me, it's Rutgers wins this game at home. I think minus 140 is fine in my opinion.
I know I'm going to sound like the guy that comes onto your podcast and say, look, I'm going to tell you, you really don't have to pay your income taxes and UFOs are absolutely real. I just want to tell you, and I'm going to sound nuts here.
Let's do it.
This is why my model is different from what you're saying. My model does not like the Rutgers defense. It really doesn't like him, which is crazy. And we know Schiano, we know what he is. And I'll just say this. If it turns out unexpectedly, it'll be because the Rutgers defense isn't what we all think. And literally, I'm not going to argue with my model, but just, what I know of Schiano, I think it's a good defense, and maybe they just haven't. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't like their caliber of opponent. So it's no fun to just come on and agree with everybody.
Of course, no. I'm happy. I'm happy you don't agree with it because I do think also I totally worth something is. It's never fun trusting Aiden Kaliakmanis. Even though I bet on him as a dog in Virginia Tech, it's never fun trusting him because he's quite bad. So that could also be something because this Washington defense has looked the part thus far. I just think they might kind of run into a bit of a buzzsaw in this Rutgers defense. Sticking in Big Ten action, what do you think about Penn State, Illinois? Illinois obviously off the huge upset win. Penn State, the offense for the most part has looked pretty formidable. And I mean, you want to talk about some impact and just kind of tying some loose ends up. Andy Kotelnicki leaves Kansas. Jalen Daniels looks really, really regressed. And you see what Drew Aller's doing now. Maybe Jalen Daniels is just an Andy Kotelnicki merchant.
It could be. Yeah. Let me pull this up here real quick. Bear with me for 1 second here.
And I could talk about the game before you get started, but what I find interesting in this matchup for Illinois and why I ended up on the over last Friday night against Nebraska at a low total, Illinois' offense is far, far improved last year.
Yep.
I think it's being a little lost in here what the changes that this Illinois offense has gone through. Not even in the run game, it's the passing game. Luke Altmaier, far improved as a passer. And it also helps that they got Zachary Franklin, who just remember a year ago, he couldn't stay on the field, but he was a highly touted transfer for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. So I think that this offense in the passing game has taken a significant step forward.
Yes.
And I think the defense, it's maybe a little soft, I would say. I think that you could pass on this defense, especially. That's where I think that the weak spot is still in the secondary, and the defensive line is pretty solid. So I went over 47.5, 48, a relatively key number. I know it's a night game on the road at Penn State, and like James Franklin was calling for like, I want this to be a whiteout, which like, don't do that, please. I don't want it to be a whiteout. But it's a low total, and I think both these teams are over teams. I know the pace maybe reduces that. Illinois is outside the top 100 in terms of seconds per play, but Penn State, I mean, they shut down West Virginia. I think Illinois' offense is better than West Virginia, and Bowling Green was able to move the ball on them, which I find a little interesting. I think Penn State could get into the 30s pretty easily. I don't need that much from Illinois to get over this total. They might get smashed, but I think Illinois can get into the end zone a few times. So I went over 47.5.
Yeah, I've got this projected total at 44.
Okay.
Now my model loves the Penn State defense, which puzzles me. I think a good long game against Kent State will do that to your numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Your point about the offense, Altmaier's doing what I was hoping that he would have done last year. You had the Barry Lunney, you had the Luke Altmaier, guy with a Power 5 pedigree, or a bigger program pedigree. He stunk last year. He was in the bottom 10 at times last year. His apex this season is a 130, which is really nice. Actually, he's got a higher apex right now than Carson Beck, for example. Different caliber of opponent, but there's a lot of proof of concept there on the offensive side of the ball. I've got this, I've got Penn State by 12 here as well. That Bowling Green game almost kind of like stains the whole picture in terms of just that horrible start. And then you have Kent State's literally probably one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in all of FBS too. So you can't read into that. I'm just not sure exactly what we're getting. Now, Aller looked great. I actually have him as the 3rd best quarterback, maybe to your point. I think I've got it was like number 3 in Apex. Or no, that was Shuck 2. I have him at 2, right behind noted passer Blake Horvath at Navy. So, he's working well. I think you've got that whole that whole meme of Jalen Daniels in bed looking at the picture of the departed guy, and it's Andy Koldenecki with Drew Aller now. That used to be me. I think it's a good fit with Aller, and maybe even I don't think Illinois has played an offense that's really worth anything. I will expect from Nebraska, but that's a defense first team. And again,
Nebraska was able to chuck the ball around on them. Raiola was cooking. They really could have. Okay. Both teams should have. And why I liked it was I thought both teams were going to pass on them. They kind of did it, and then they stopped for a while. Then they figured out and did it and got me over the total. But Illinois so far, I mean, they played Kansas and they shut down Jalen Daniels, got a pick 6 to help that out. That was a relatively lower scoring game. That's pretty much it so far. Now you're also going on the road the week after this big upset. And I think you're looking at somewhere where Penn State's into the 30s, but I think Illinois is able to give a few scores. Yeah. And we all know Penn State. They tend to run up the score late in games. James Franklin isn't afraid to cover some spreads and maybe send some games over.
He has a very good awareness of the closing line, it seems.
Yeah. Where else are you thinking this week?
Yeah, let me go here. All right, what about another Big Ten game? Nebraska and Purdue, and I know this number's moved a bit. Is it up to 10 now, I think?
Nebraska-Purdue is currently sitting at 10 across the board, total 49.
So, as you mentioned, Raiola's been. I have him as good, not great. Apex of 111, but as a true freshman, I mean that's about all you can ask for. To say that Purdue has struggled, passing the ball is an understatement. Apex of -21. That's Connor Bazelak is laughing at that, and you've got a Nebraska team that's very good on defense, particularly against the pass. I don't have this as particularly close. I've got it 36-17 Nebraska. My co-host has it 41-11. All the descriptives point to Nebraska as well. Purdue is just way below average on both sides of the ball. The only reason I'm a little scared is that whole first conference road game spot, but I just I have to be convinced under the new coach at Purdue. I'm not seeing a lot of proof of concept so far, aside from a recruiting standpoint.
Not something I've dived in that deep. Just not a game I have gone into. I just didn't really have it circled. That being said, just something I've noticed 2 straight weeks, maybe related, maybe not. Purdue's been hammered around game time. Notre Dame, I think, was injury concerned, but last week they closed I think it was like a 1-point dog at Oregon State and got absolutely dump trucked by them. So I do think that's something to keep in mind. Maybe if you're weighing a bet, you want to get inside 10, maybe there's some love that goes towards Purdue. Purdue, they played a super fast tempo, but the offense isn't particularly good. So I don't know how far that gets you. Maybe that helps you get Nebraska a few extra possessions. Maybe it's team total Nebraska.
If you can't throw the ball, I don't care. Great, you're doing 3 and outs then very quickly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. UCF Colorado number flew way too fast. It's now through 14. On the Wednesday show, when team totals become available, I'm pretty sure I'll have a UCF team total bet. Yes. I mean, what is Colorado going to do in this game? I mean, first of all, Colorado is just flat out bad, especially on defense. Outside the top 100 in explosive rush defense, how is UCF not absolutely running this one up? Breaking 40 for sure. This is the perfect setup for a UCF blowout win. At home in the bounce house, you got Colorado off of the magical win against Baylor. Full credit to them. They win that game, but this team doesn't stand a chance. And on the other end, UCF's defense, at the very least, this defense can wreak havoc and, get Shedeur on his ass. And I just wonder how many more shots Shedeur's taken before he's done for the year, to be quite honest with you. I think it's 2 losses in a row and they're done. I think this whole experiment kind of fizzles out. I think UCF can really run it up. The market agrees. That's why I might pivot to team total over. But this should be an absolute shit kicking from the Knights. I don't see how Colorado keeps it close. Not to mention the travel and all that. UCF off a bye.
Yeah, I agree. UCF from a team I don't want to play at all. That team just scares me. You've got KJ Jefferson. I've got him number 5, I think, in Apex. And I think let me pull this up real quick. In terms of their GGAB, their basically running game effectiveness, 3rd in the country behind Army and Navy. So if the only 2 teams ahead of you are service academies, this is frightening. This is probably, I'm going to say this is probably Gus's by far best offense that doesn't involve Cam Newton. They can do it. They scare you. I mean, they pick your poison, literally pick your poison.
UCF is currently averaging nearly 7 yards per carry.
Yeah.
They are 2nd in offensive line yards. And what that means is basically they are literally pushing the defense backwards. And they are just opening up gaps for Harvey, for Penny Boone, and KJ himself. And then you have a receiver like Kobe Hudson on the outside. This team can easily get to 40. With the tempo they play at, and Colorado, with the way that some of their drives have stalled, their lack of stability on special teams especially, I think UCF can really run this up here, and I see no doubt that they can get into the 40s.
Yeah, I'm not quite there on the side, only because
through 14, I'm out. I'm not trying to lay that. I make it UCF minus 16. So I like them, but I would have, I'd rather have 13.5, which I missed. So that's why I think I'm going to pivot to the team total.
And I've got, along those same lines, I've got the projected total of 74, and I've got them by 18. So what is that? I mean, UCF can do it all day long. And here's the thing that really scares me. My metrics, when I do these projections, and it still works out pretty well, it doesn't account for pace. It literally just says the average game now, FBS versus FBS game, is a 53, and we just total 53, and we work from there.
Yeah.
So you've got a team like this that just, they don't let you breathe. and a very obliging Colorado defense. I like your team total. I didn't even think about that because I'm very one-dimensional and you're more well-rounded than me. But yeah, I think that, that is the play, I think.
Where else you thinking? What else you got? There are a few interesting games on the card. I want to hit like 3 or 4 more before we get out of here.
Well, I can guarantee you I'm going to pick ones that are not on your grid. And if they are, then God bless you.
Let's see it. Test me.
Middle Tennessee at Memphis.
I have something circled for this one.
Really? Okay. Let's see if you're on the. And believe me, this is another UFO. I would have never even thought until I run the first.
I don't think we're on the same page.
Okay. And I've got. Okay. So it's Memphis giving 25.5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got this a 13-point game, and my co-host actually has this a tie game.
Your guys' numbers are
I know, it's crazy. It's a bad defense. I mean, Middle Tennessee's defense is atrocious. They actually do have an explosive offense. This guy Vidiadior or something like that.
Viasho or something.
Something like that. Yeah, they actually have a more explosive passing offense, and Memphis does struggle defensively. Defensive apex of 131. I think they're going to be just bad enough on defense. Pass defense specifically, even though the run defense stinks too. I think they're going to be obliging enough against a horrible Middle Tennessee team. But we both have it at least within the number. Believe me, I'm not playing this money line. And again, give me the same narrative because I've given you the crazy narrative here.
I took a ride on the Middle Tennessee amusement park attraction.
What?
A few weeks ago. I did not enjoy it whatsoever. It was miserable. But the offense is really good. The defense is absolutely terrible. It's really, really bad. So my look in this game was over or Memphis team total over. Just kind of take out Middle Tennessee needing to keep up, because I will say, while I was never high on Memphis, we did the AAC preview. I was like, I don't know if I really I don't like this team particularly. The offense is still potent though, and they can really run it up on a team like Middle Tennessee. I mean, you look through. Let's pull up their box score. What is it? 40 plus each game.
Okay. Look at Seth Hennigan's numbers for the year. Is he 78 apex? I was saying before the season, I think he's a good quarterback, not a great one. Now he's got work to do to get back to good.
So Middle Tennessee to start the year, 32-25 win over Tennessee Tech in the final seconds. Let up 52 to Ole Miss, 49 to Western, 45 to Duke. So I do think there could be points. Middle Tennessee, they put up 17 and 21 against Duke and Western Kentucky. So I think Middle Tennessee could score. I don't know if I want to mess with like that big of an underdog. I don't know. I had written down over or Memphis team total over.
We both have this going way over. I have a total of 75. My co-host has 61. So what is the number on this?
60, let's call it circa 61.5.
Okay.
60, 60.5. It's kind of all over the place. I would say if you are betting it and you're listening, get under 61. It's a key number on totals. One from me.
Yeah.
What do you make of the UNLV Fresno game?
Oh.
Sneaky, huge game in the Mountain West.
Yeah.
There's a lot on the line here. I'm interested in your thoughts. I have not played it yet. I have something written down. I'm waiting for some injury news to develop.
So I've got a note to play this once, and please don't laugh at me. Once the unlicensed book, and it's unlicensed book so they can do this kind of thing, once they post a total, yes, I don't have access until like maybe tomorrow.
Okay.
I can't really, I've got this number basically within the range of not bettable in terms of side. The thing that's interesting about UNLV is I think the narrative people think is, hey, Brendan Marion, go offense and all this stuff. And their offense kind of stinks this year.
It's the run offense.
And you know what it is? And this is a good sign if you're a UNLV fan. It's the defense has been there. Mm-hmm. That was the concern. Their defense stunk last year, and you want to see really the coach's side of the ball improve. Barry Odom, a defensive guy. Yep. And now that I've got them rated as a 6.6, which is a very good defense. Guess who was by the numbers, and there's some weirdness here. I have Fresno as an elite defense.
Yeah.
Okay. And I did, they've had some weird opponents. They have like one-legged Michigan. They have, I guess, zero-legged New Mexico State, really bad. So there's some skewing there, but I've got this as a defensive battle. I've got this total projected at 28, and I have an elite and an almost elite defense, and I've got a shaky quarterback. And I think you like Mikey Keene more than I do. I was disappointed in his apex last year. You've got a lot of reasons to go under here, and again, I'm going to do it as soon as
This is another one, and I need to get better at it myself. It's something that I typically will write down like side and total, which way I lean, and I feel like I'm always kind of driving myself insane. Like, should I take the side? Should I take the total? Like, how do I see this game going? What am I most confident in? So I have under. I make this 48.5. I also make it UNLV -1.5. I'm down on UNLV relative to the market. I'm high on Fresno relative to the market. A few things that play that might take me to the under. One, UNLV, you mentioned go offense. This is typically, you would think a really fast, explosive offense. They're 115th in seconds per play, and they can't throw the ball a damn. Matthew Solka, this guy's a glorified running back playing quarterback for the Rebs offense, which, listen, it's worked so far, but pretty fortunate result at Kansas. I think that some of those fumble luck and that last touchdown drive really kind of got them the win. Was pretty fortunate there. They're 102nd in EPA per pass, 25th in EPA, 32nd, in EPA per rush. Fresno, though, look, I thought the defense, I know Michigan wasn't doing much on that offense, but they still went toe-to-toe with them on the defensive line especially. They really kind of looked the part, which I was pretty impressed with in that game. So far this season, Fresno, the defense, 40th in EPA per play. They get off the field great on third downs. And no explosive plays. Top 50 in both explosive run and pass rate. Leads me to the under as well. Haven't made a play yet because Malik Sherrod, their stud running back, Fresno, didn't play last week. I think people are going to look at that New Mexico box score and say, oh, Fresno, fraud box score. They're going to get smoked by UNLV. They sat out a lot of guys in that game. I believe they were down 2 offensive line starters, definitely confirmed one. I think a second one as well was on the injury report. And Sherrod didn't play. I think that was we're going to just get through this game. We don't really care. And they covered, I think, double digits on the road. This was, I believe, I'm inferring, I think that this was a look ahead to this game. Now, I may end up on the under instead. It depends on the injury news. Again, those are offensive injuries. So obviously if you hamper Fresno's offense, I'm going to like the under even more because you mentioned it. Barry Odom last year was, I'm almost certain, the last coach hired in the cycle. He got there right before spring practice, so he missed the whole transfer portal. Not his guys. He got some Power 4, formerly known as a Power 5 transfers to come in, and that clearly you're seeing the effects on the defense is taking a step forward, starting to look more like a Barry Odom team. So lean towards the under with you. I think that there's a lot of reasons to go under on something. I was hoping that maybe this would post a little bit higher. Open 54.5, and it's 50. There's a 52.5 there.
I'm in no hurry on this because literally this is one where I don't need to get the best of the number. I've got such a margin here. I can probably I love this one.
All right. One more each. What do you got?
All right. Because I literally live in the fringes of the fringes here. I love this game. New Mexico at New Mexico State.
Okay.
One of the things that we thrive on is, and it comes across as just really negative jerks on our podcast, is really breaking the news on who's just bad and who's exceptionally bad that the market doesn't understand it's exceptionally bad. And my guy, there is no describing just how bad New Mexico State's offense is. I mean, I need to bring a poet or a novelist in here just to describe it because numbers cannot do it justice. They are so inept. They are so bad offensively. You've got New Mexico who really struggles on defense, but they do have a dynamic quarterback. New Mexico State's not good at anything.
Yep.
I think even with the deficiencies that New Mexico has on defense, you've got at least Bronco Mendenhall against, tee-hee, ha-ha, speaking of UNLV, Tony Sanchez. If you liked the Tony Sanchez era at UNLV, you will love the Tony Sanchez era at New Mexico State. New Mexico State apex of -31. I think that you're just going to have, this will be pointsy. ish. At least New Mexico will get a lot of points. Don't forget, New Mexico actually, had quite a few points against Arizona. Not that Arizona is a great defense, but they are a Power 4 team. New Mexico State, I just don't see it. I don't see this particularly close. I've got New Mexico by 29. My partner's got them by 23, and I think that this is stealing right here.
So your model, especially early, like it leans into like the tail ends almost. You know what I mean? Like your projections are off, but it's almost skewed directionally. You know what I mean? Like it seems like your numbers are definitely more wonky. Like your numbers aren't necessarily geared towards the market. It's not market regress. It's more like I'm just projecting a number, not necessarily like what a betting line is.
And I do want to mention too, because when I listen to your podcast, it makes me nervous because you deal in such smaller margins, and exactly to that point, I don't play anything unless the margin is on my model at least 10, or on both our models there's at least a margin of at least 7.
Yeah.
So when I have that, I know directionally there's, more often than not, I've got the best of it here.
100%. I had New Mexico as a play for me. It's already up to 9.5, so it's kind of a little out of range. My only concern with New Mexico, who I like this year, I think it's a good like underdog bet and over bet as well throughout the year. But I'm just curious how this defense is going to hold up as like a big, like needing to get margin to win. It's a little, you know what I mean? Where like this and I know New Mexico State sucks. I bet against them against Sam Houston last week. That was a chore for them to even just like snap the ball and hand it off. So I do like New Mexico. I agree with you. My only pushback on it at over a touchdown is just like, is this New Mexico defense just like so bad you can't even quantify how bad the defense is? That's my only concern, because New Mexico sneaky, one of the more grueling schedules to start the season.
Yeah. I would just say I can't disagree, but I would just say everything you've said about the struggles of New Mexico on defense, I would put to the 5th power when it comes to the New Mexico State offense. And again, if it comes down to Bronco Mendenhall against Tony Sanchez, that's not even a discussion in my book.
One more from me.
Yep.
Kansas TCU. We're looking at, have not played it yet. We are looking at a line of Kansas. You can find anywhere from 2.5. There's some 1.5s, total 59.5. Kansas off 2 gut-wrenching losses. I mean, you call it 3 gut-wrenching losses if you want to include Illinois. So now 1-3 on the season. TCU, that score is going to look really ugly against SMU. They lose 66-42. That game kind of got away from them almost instantly. Box score won't show it. They outgained SMU by 200 yards. They were -3 in turnovers. I think I'm going to bet TCU if it hits 3. I think TCU is the better team on both sides of the ball. Your WTF wrong team favor type thing.
Yep.
I think Jalen Daniels cannot be trusted. I think TCU can both run and pass, because the strength of Kansas defense is in the secondary. They're much better against the pass and the run. But I think Hoover can really mix it up here. I think TCU, I think you're getting a pretty nice number. They were fortunate to be ahead against UCF the week before, and they end up losing the game. I think rightfully so. UCF missed like 3 kicks in that game and still managed to win. Against SMU, that game got away from them quick. Sonny Dykes got ejected. Maybe this is one where like, the wheels are falling off TCU. I don't know. I feel like the wheels are closer to falling off for Kansas in this one. TCU to me rates as a much better team. I make TCU a small favorite in this game. I'm just waiting to see if I can get a 3.
Yeah. Josh Hoover's actually having he wasn't so great last season, but he's got a 128 apex this season so far. And I think it's just gotten lost in the shuffle of a bunch of weird things in the TCU season. The other thing, tell me if you know this name, because you live in this kind of area. When I do my player Ryan, my top receiving threats, number 1 in the country, Jack, is it Betch or Beck?
Betch, yeah, you kidding me?
The best in the country so far.
JB, how do you know JB?
There's a lot of that, a lot of Stanford in that number, I guess I'd say, but still, you don't get number 1. He's ahead of T-Mac on Arizona. It's legit, and he was uncoverable at times in that Stanford game.
Yeah.
So that's a good combo right there. Long story short, I agree with you. I've got Kansas as a 4-point dog, and definitely
get 3. I make TCU. I got 1.5. and I lean towards the over.
In the meantime, if it doesn't get to 3, maybe just a smaller, just money line on TCU then.
Yeah, I think that SMU game is maybe going to skew some stuff there, or like maybe some market descent, if that's the right word. I think TCU is in a much better place than Kansas is. And also, if you really want to throw this in there, Kansas is playing at I think this one's either at the soccer stadium or at Arrowhead. Either way, it's not a true home field. And like, I don't really think you could assign anything to Kansas. Like that, like, sure, you could fill it up. Like, I don't think you really assign like a home field advantage. Like, this number is implying that Kansas is better on a neutral than TCU, which I just disagree with.
No.
So TCU haven't played it yet, but we'll talk on the Wednesday show. I'll be doing, market updates, injury news, some bets I added. I'm sure to have a bunch more player props, which went really, really well on the podcast last week. Start sharing those. I'm going to share more of those on Wednesday when those markets become available. Buck, I appreciate the time. Gracious as always. Please tell everybody where they can find your work, your podcast, and everything else that you do in the college football space.
Yeah, the podcast is The Sharpest College Football Podcast. We're on Spotify and YouTube. Might look under Lean Toss-Up, one word, if that's the channel, if that's what they call it. Also on Twitter, @BuckMetrics, BUCK Metrics, one word. And for those who really, really need something to do, I co-host the USCBasketball.com podcast, Dunk City podcast about USC basketball. We're in the Big Ten, so now we're just officially in a tough spot in both sports, basketball and football.
Yeah, but all aboard the Must Bus.
There you go. Exactly.
Elite 8 run incoming for the Must Bus. As always, you can follow me on Twitter @ReedWallach for my random musings on college football and the like. Nets basketball season coming around, so I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about my Nets. But best bets for me, which you could find on my bet stamp @RW33. Arkansas under 52. Louisville, I'll track the bad number 4.5. If it hits 7, I will get back involved there. Penn State over 47.5, and the Rutgers money line -140. I will be back on Wednesday with a handful more. And I think we're going to run another underdog round robin back. We went 3 for 5 last week, so that's 2 positive weeks out of the 4. So far, so good. We're in the positive there. An ECU win away from a real windfall there, but it's all good. We move on. But Buck, thank you for your time. We got to do this again soon, man. Enjoy your games. Good luck to USC. I hope you guys lose admirably. And I will see you all on Wednesday for the Best Bet Show.